The CEO mocked the waitress with a 200 meters offer to save his company, but then she worked pure magic and proved him completely wrong. Comment your city below and hit subscribe to join our global community. This story has an ending that will blow your mind. The Meridian Hotel's elegant restaurant was where Marcus conducted business when he wanted to intimidate people in refined surroundings. The crystal chandeliers, impeccable European service, soft jazz piano in the background, all of it was designed to make ordinary people feel small, insignificant, beneath the weight of wealth and success. Emma Waters had worked there for 3 years, and she'd learned to navigate the egos and demands of the wealthy with practiced grace and genuine kindness. She was used to being invisible to most guests, which actually suited her fine. At 29, she'd quietly accepted that her life would be one of quiet service, modest tips, and dreams that remained dreams. She didn't recognize Marcus Sterling when he arrived that Tuesday evening, though she'd seen his face in magazines at the salon where her friend Tanya worked as a stylist. He sat alone at table 7, his expression as dark as storm clouds, his expensive, custom-tailored suit unable to hide the tension radiating from his shoulders like heat waves. Emma approached with her practiced professional smile, notepad ready. "Good evening, sir. What can I get you tonight?" she asked warmly. Marcus looked up briefly, and for a moment something flickered across his face. Perhaps recognition of her ordinariness, perhaps realization of what he was about to do. "Water?" "Nothing else," he said curtly, dismissing her with a glance that suggested she was beneath his notice. She returned with the water in a crystal glass and left him alone, as he clearly wanted. Emma had learned to read people in this job. This man was carrying the weight of something enormous, something that made his expensive suit seem like a costume, his money seem worthless. She'd served enough rich people to know that wealth didn't guarantee happiness or peace of mind. In fact, she'd noticed the opposite seemed true more often than not. An hour later, as Emma cleared tables nearby, Marcus called her back. His dark eyes held a strange mixture of contempt and calculation as he studied her with uncomfortable intensity. "What's your name?" he demanded. "Emma, sir. Emma Waters." "Emma what?" "Emma Waters, sir." Marcus leaned back in his chair, observing her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable but also curious. "You work hard, don't you? I can see it in the way you move, efficient, attentive, never complaining, always present. I notice things like that." He paused, watching her reaction carefully. "How much do you make in a month, Emma Waters?" The question was intrusive, inappropriate even, but Emma answered honestly. "About $4,000 with tips, sir. It's enough." "Enough," he repeated, as if the word tasted bitter on his tongue. He laughed then, a sharp, humorless sound that echoed through the restaurant. "Do you want to know something funny, Emma? I'm about to lose everything. My company, my reputation, my entire empire, all of it. And I'm sitting here watching a waitress who makes $4,000 a month, and I'm wondering if you're somehow wealthier than I am, because at least you seem to have peace of mind." Emma didn't know what to say. This man was clearly unraveling, and she felt a sudden surge of compassion for him, despite his rudeness. "I'm sorry to hear that, sir. If you'd like to talk—" "I don't want sympathy," he interrupted harshly. "I want a solution, and I'm going to offer you one." He pulled out his phone and opened an email, then set it down on the table. "I need $200 million in 30 days, or my company folds. The board is useless. My investors are circling like vultures. So I'm going to make you an offer, Emma Waters, and I want you to understand that I'm completely serious." He paused, his dark eyes boring into hers with unsettling intensity. "I'm going to give you $200 million if you can save my company." Emma thought she'd misheard him. "I'm sorry, what? Did you say 200 million? You heard me correctly. $200 million. That's enough to buy your own company, invest wisely, live comfortably for the rest of your life without ever working another day. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Of course, you won't be able to do it. You're a waitress. You have no business experience, no education in finance or management, no connections in the corporate world. So offering you this money is essentially meaningless. It's not really a gift. It's a joke. I'm a desperate man making a mockery of an impossible situation. He smiled cruelly, and Emma felt the sting of his contempt like a physical blow. This man was so lost, so broken by his own supposed importance, that he'd reduced her to the butt of a cruel joke. She should have walked away. She should have reported him to her manager. Instead, something inside her, something born of years of quiet observation and genuine compassion, made her speak. "Mr. Sterling," she said softly, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "I don't know why you're offering me this or why you're being cruel about it, but I'll accept your challenge. Not for the money, but because I think you need someone to believe that there's a way through this that doesn't require cynicism and mockery. I'll help you save your company, and when I do, I'm going to give that $200 million to charity." For a moment, Marcus's expression shifted completely. The cruelty fell away, replaced by something that looked almost like shame, almost like recognition. But then the mask slipped back into place. "You're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid," he said. "Either way, you'll need access to my office and my company's financial records. Can you start tomorrow?" "I'll need to give notice here," Emma said. "Don't bother. I'll cover 2 months of your salary. Just come to Sterling Industries at 8 in the morning. Bring professional clothes. You'll need them." She should have questioned his motives. She should have been skeptical of his offer. She should have contacted lawyers or investigated his background. But Emma had spent her life believing in people's capacity for redemption, and she could see something beneath Marcus Sterling's walls, a glimmer of someone who desperately wanted to be saved, even if he didn't know it yet. That night, in her small apartment in Queens, Emma couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what on earth she'd agreed to do. But she also felt something she hadn't felt in years, a sense of purpose, a conviction that God had put her in that restaurant at that exact moment for a specific reason. Something was changing. The next morning, dressed in the nicest clothes she owned, Emma arrived at Sterling Industries. The building was all glass and steel, a monument to Marcus's success, and she suspected his emptiness and isolation. The security guard at the front desk barely glanced at her before waving her through to the elevator. As she rode up to the 42nd floor, Emma took a deep breath and whispered a prayer. She had no idea how she was going to save this company. But she had 30 days to figure it out, and for the first time in her life, Emma Waters felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. Marcus's office was intimidating, all dark wood, expensive art, and windows that overlooked the entire city below. He was already there, dressed in a bespoke suit, looking like he hadn't slept in days. When Emma entered, he barely looked up from his computer screen. "You actually came," he said, surprised by her appearance. "I thought you'd reconsider overnight and realize this was a ridiculous situation." "I said I would," Emma replied, setting her purse down carefully on a leather chair. "So where do we start?" For the next several hours, Marcus walked her through the financial catastrophe that was Sterling Industries. The company manufactured luxury goods, high-end leather products, accessories and fashion items, and it had been phenomenally successful for many years. But Marcus had become complacent. He'd hired yes-men instead of innovators. He'd stopped listening to his customers. He'd invested in risky ventures that had failed spectacularly. And worst of all, he'd become so focused on quarterly profits that he'd completely lost sight of why the company existed in the first place. "The problem," Marcus said bitterly, is that I built this company, but I have no idea how to save it. I'm good at making money, but I'm terrible at understanding what people actually want anymore." Emma listened carefully, asking questions that seemed naive at first, but gradually revealed a deeper understanding of business and human nature. She wanted to know about the employees. What did they think? What were they saying? What had changed in the past 5 years? "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "I don't really talk to the employees. That's what managers are for." "Maybe that's part of the problem," Emma suggested gently. "What if we went downstairs and actually asked people what they think?" Marcus looked at her as if she'd suggested they strip naked and dance in the streets. "That's not how business works." "Maybe it should be," Emma replied. Against his better judgment, Marcus took Emma down to the design studio on the 25th floor. The designers looked shocked to see the CEO actually visiting their workspace. There was nervous shuffling, quick attempts to look busy, and a general atmosphere of fear and apprehension. But Emma had a gift for making people feel comfortable. She smiled warmly, asked genuine questions, and actually listened to the answers. What she learned was illuminating. The designers had brilliant ideas that Marcus's cost-cutting measures had forced them to abandon. The leather suppliers felt disrespected and undervalued. The customer service team had been cut from 50 people to 10, leading to overwhelmed staff and unhappy customers. And throughout the company, there was a sense that no one cared anymore. Not about quality, not about craftsmanship, not about the actual human beings who bought their products. As they rode the elevator back up, Marcus was quiet. Emma could see something shifting in his expression, the beginning of understanding, perhaps, or the first cracks in the wall he'd built around himself. The conversations she'd had with his employees had revealed truths that no financial analyst's report ever could. This company wasn't struggling due to market conditions or external factors. It was struggling because its leader had forgotten what leadership actually meant. "You see it now, don't you?" Emma said softly. "Your company isn't failing because the business model is broken. It's failing because you stopped caring about anything except money. But people aren't motivated purely by profit. They want to matter. They want to create things they can be proud of. They want to work for someone who actually values them as human beings." She turned to face him directly. "Every single person I spoke with today told me something similar. They miss the company they worked for when it had a soul. They miss feeling like their work mattered. That's what you've inadvertently taken from them. Not jobs, but purpose." Marcus stopped walking. "How is a waitress knowing more about business than I do?" he asked. But this time there was no cruelty in his voice. Only genuine bewilderment and something like shame. "I'm not a waitress because I love serving tables," Emma said. "I'm a waitress because I need money to survive. But I watch people. I listen. I try to understand what they need and give it to them. That's actually all business is, Mr. Sterling. Understanding human needs and filling them. You've just forgotten how to do that." Over the next week, Emma implemented small changes that cost nothing but revealed everything. She had Marcus visit the factory floor without warning. She arranged a casual lunch with the designers. She convinced him to actually read the customer service complaints instead of having an assistant summarize them. And slowly, painfully, Marcus began to see his own failure clearly. The turning point came on a Friday evening when they were working late, reviewing financial projections. Emma found a design in Marcus's files, something gorgeous, intricate, and clearly groundbreaking. "What is this?" she asked. Marcus glanced over and his expression darkened. "That's the collection my head designer, Patricia, proposed 2 years ago. I rejected it because it was too expensive to produce. We'd have had to raise prices, and I was convinced that would hurt sales." "Did you ask customers?" Emma pressed. "No, I just knew." "What if you were wrong?" Emma's voice was gentle but firm. "What if there are customers out there who would pay a premium for quality and craftsmanship? What if people actually want to buy things that are made with care and artistry? Marcus leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. Even if that were true, we don't have time to redesign our entire product line. We need results in 30 days. So let's do this collection, Emma said, pointing to Patricia's designs. Let's bring back craftsmanship. Let's show investors that we're returning to what made Sterling Industries special in the first place. Let's tell the real story, not about profit margins and market share, but about the human beings who make these beautiful things. You're insane, Marcus said, but he was already reaching for his phone to call Patricia. 3 hours later, Patricia was in Marcus's office, crying. Not from sadness, but from the shock of being heard. Her designs weren't just technically brilliant, they were a reflection of her heart, her heritage, and her belief that luxury goods should celebrate human artistry. When Marcus committed to producing a limited edition collection featuring her designs, she pledged to work around the clock to make it happen. As midnight approached, Emma and Marcus sat alone in his office once more. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city glittered beneath them like a handful of diamonds scattered on black velvet. "Thank you," Marcus said quietly. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the city, at his empire, at everything he'd built on the wrong foundations. "I've had the best business education money can buy. I've read every book about leadership and strategy. And somehow, a woman I met days ago understands my own company better than I do." Emma didn't respond immediately. She was watching him carefully, seeing for the first time the man beneath the armor of wealth and success. He was lonely, he was frightened. And despite his cruelty and cynicism, he was beginning to recognize that there was another way to live. "You're not stupid, Mr. Sterling," Emma said finally. "You're just lost. And there's a difference. Lost people can find their way home. You just need someone to light the path." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "The fact that you can recognize what's broken in your company means you have the capacity to fix it. More importantly, it means you have the capacity to recognize what's broken inside yourself and fix that too. That's not stupidity. That's wisdom." Marcus turned to look at her then, and in his dark eyes, Emma saw something shift. A small but significant opening in the fortress he'd built around his heart over many years. For the first time in decades, he allowed himself to imagine a different kind of life. Not one defined by conquest and accumulation, but one defined by connection and meaning. The following week, Emma threw herself into the work with an intensity that surprised even Marcus. She wasn't simply working for a paycheck, or even for the $200 million she'd promised to give away. She was working because she believed in what they were building together. She helped coordinate with Patricia's design team, ensuring that every piece reflected the artisanal quality that had originally made Sterling Industries famous. She worked with the marketing department to craft a new narrative, one that emphasized the human stories behind each product. And she pushed Marcus to be more vulnerable with his investors, sharing not his usual confident projections, but his genuine commitment to returning to the company's core values. Marcus, for his part, was undergoing his own transformation. He started arriving earlier to work, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He spent time on the factory floor, learning the names of workers and hearing their stories. He had genuine conversations with designers, manufacturers, and customer service representatives. And with each passing day, he became a little less cold, a little more human. Their working relationship began to shift as well. Marcus started bringing Emma coffee in the mornings, not as a gesture of command, but as a gesture of camaraderie. They'd work side by side for hours, discussing not just business strategy, but life, dreams, and the things that truly mattered. Emma shared stories from her childhood, growing up with a single mother who worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat, learning early that money wasn't everything, because they never had enough of it to buy happiness. Marcus, in turn, shared his own story in pieces. A childhood with a cold, demanding father who measured everything in terms of success and failure. A mother who died when he was 16, not from illness, but from the stress of living with a man who could never be satisfied. An adolescent spent learning that love was conditional, that affection had to be earned through achievement, and that vulnerability was weakness. "I swore I'd never be like my father," Marcus said one night as they worked late in his office. "But in the process of trying not to be him, I became him. I built this company the same way he built his, through domination, through fear, through the constant pursuit of more. And it didn't make me happy. It just made me hollow." He turned away, unable to meet her eyes. "I've spent 34 years accumulating wealth and power, and I've accomplished nothing that actually matters. I have no one who truly knows me, no one who would stay if the money disappeared. What's the point of all of this if I have to be alone to have it?" Emma reached across the desk and took his hand. The gesture was simple but profound. "You're not hollow," she said. "You're just remembering how to be human. It takes time, but it's possible." She squeezed his hand gently. "And for what it's worth, I'm staying. Not for your money or your empire, just for you, for the man you're becoming." 2 weeks into Emma's transformation of Sterling Industries, the investors came back. The presentation that Marcus and Emma delivered was unlike anything the financial world had seen before. Instead of spreadsheets and projections, they showed videos of artisans explaining their craft. They displayed Patricia's new designs. They shared customer testimonials about how Sterling products had become family heirlooms passed down through generations. And most importantly, they shared the company's renewed commitment to quality over quantity, to craftsmanship over profit margins. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Investors who had been ready to walk away were suddenly leaning forward, asking questions about how they could get involved. By the end of the presentation, 3 major funds had committed to significant investments, and pre-orders for Patricia's limited edition collection had exceeded projections by 400%. When the investors left, Marcus stood alone in the conference room, staring at the papers before him. The crisis had been averted. Sterling Industries would survive, and more than that, it would thrive, not because of anything Marcus had done, but because of what Emma had helped him see. He found her in his office, staring out the window at the city below. She looked exhausted, but radiant, as if she'd just completed something monumental. "We did it," Marcus said. "You did it. We did it together," Emma corrected. "I just helped you remember what you already knew. The vision was always inside you. You just needed someone to remind you it was worth fighting for." Marcus turned to face her, and the distance between them suddenly seemed significant, not just physically but emotionally. Over the past 2 weeks, Emma had become the most important person in his life. She was the first person he wanted to talk to in the morning, and the last person he wanted to say goodnight to. "Emma," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something. And I need to be honest about it because you deserve honesty. These past 2 weeks have changed my life, but not because of what you've done for my company. They've changed my life because of what you've done for me. You've made me want to be a better person. You've made me remember that there's more to life than power and money and control. And I'm terrified of feeling this way because I've spent my entire life avoiding precisely this kind of vulnerability." Emma's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Marcus, Let me finish," he said gently. "I know this is complicated. I know that you came here to help save my company, and I took advantage of that desperation by making a cruel offer. I know that anything that happens between us could be seen as a result of that power imbalance. So I want to be clear about something. The job is yours. Your position at Sterling Industries is permanent. with a salary that reflects your value, 200,000 a year, comprehensive benefits, and a path to becoming a vice president if you want it. That offer is unconditional. It doesn't depend on how you feel about me or whether you're willing to give me a chance. Marcus, I don't need a fancy salary or a job title, Emma said, her voice breaking slightly. I came here because I saw a man who was lost, and I wanted to help him find his way home. And somewhere along the way, I fell in love with the man you're becoming. The world seemed to stop. Marcus reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind Emma's ear, his hand lingering against her cheek. Is that true? It's terrifying and complicated, and probably a terrible idea, Emma said. But yes, it's true. Marcus kissed her then, and it was nothing like the calculated, controlled gestures he usually made. It was genuine, passionate and completely unburdened by his usual armor of cynicism. It was the kiss of a man who was finally, after 34 years, beginning to understand what it meant to be truly alive. Of course, complications followed almost immediately. The business world is small, and the story of a billionaire CEO falling for a waitress-turned-consultant spread through Manhattan's financial district like wildfire. Some people found it romantic. Most people found it absolutely scandalous. Board members began whispering about whether Marcus's judgment was compromised. Competitors started circulating rumors that Emma was a gold digger who'd seduced the CEO into making poor business decisions. The media got hold of the story and ran with it, turning what had been a genuine human connection into tabloid fodder. Marcus wanted to ignore it all, but Emma insisted they address it head-on. People are going to believe what they want to believe, she said. But we know the truth about how we feel and what we've accomplished. We can't let other people's cynicism define our reality. They decided to go public with their relationship in a way that was both transparent and authentic. Marcus gave an interview to the Wall Street Journal in which he spoke openly about his journey, how his company had been failing because he'd lost sight of what actually mattered, and how Emma had helped him find his way back. He talked about his fear of vulnerability and his history of emotional distance. He shared his late mother's memory and his determination not to repeat his father's mistakes. And then he said something that shocked the financial world. I love Emma Waters, not because she saved my company, but because she saved me. She showed me that there's more to life than money and power. She taught me that the greatest wealth a person can have is meaningful connection with another human being. I don't expect everyone to understand, but I wanted to be honest about my transformation because I think the world needs more honesty. Emma gave her own interview, which was equally powerful. She talked about growing up without money, about learning to see people instead of their bank accounts, about recognizing the loneliness that often comes with extreme wealth. Mr. Sterling, Marcus, had everything except what actually matters, she said. He had success without satisfaction, power without purpose. I didn't transform his company. I just helped him remember why his company existed in the first place. And in the process, we discovered something neither of us expected. Love. The response was mixed, but ultimately positive. While some in the business community remained skeptical, others began to see Marcus in a new light. Sterling Industries' stock actually rose as investors recognized that the company's renewed focus on quality and craftsmanship was more valuable long-term than its previous profit-obsessed strategy. But not everyone was happy about the changes. 3 weeks after Emma came to work at Sterling Industries, Marcus's CFO, Richard Blackwell, requested a private meeting with Marcus. Richard had been with the company for 8 years and was known as a brilliant financial strategist. He was also ruthless, ambitious, and resentful of the influence Emma had gained over Marcus. "We need to talk about Emma Waters," Richard said, closing the door to Marcus's office carefully. "She's destabilizing the company." "The company is thriving," Marcus replied calmly. "Our stock is up, investor confidence is restored, and pre-orders for the new collection are breaking records." "For now," Richard said. "But you've made decisions based on sentimentality rather than sound financial strategy. The limited edition collection is going to cost us millions to produce. The factory floor improvements you've implemented are cutting into profit margins. And most concerningly, you're making major decisions based on the counsel of a woman with no business experience." "Emma has proven herself repeatedly," Marcus said coldly. "She understands our customers in a way that you never will." "She's manipulating you," Richard said bluntly. "She came in here as an unknown waitress and somehow convinced you to completely restructure a company worth billions. Either she's a genius manipulator or you've become emotionally compromised. And given that you're now romantically involved with her, I'd argue it's the latter." Marcus felt his old anger rising, the cold fury that had once been his default response. But before he could respond, Emma appeared in the doorway. She'd been waiting outside, as Marcus had asked her to be. She'd suspected that Richard would pull something like this. "Richard," she said calmly, "you're worried that I've influenced Marcus into making bad decisions. You're worried that sentiment is replacing sound business strategy. You're worried that I'm diverting company resources away from profit maximization. Is that fair?" "Precisely," Richard said, clearly surprised by her directness. "Then let me show you something," Emma said. She pulled up a presentation on Marcus's computer, financial projections that she and Marcus had developed together. The data was compelling. By focusing on quality and craftsmanship, Sterling Industries would actually increase long-term profitability exponentially. Customer lifetime value would increase significantly. Brand loyalty would strengthen dramatically. They'd be able to charge premium prices for premium products. The short-term profit margins might dip slightly, but the long-term financial health of the company would be exponentially stronger. "This is fantasy," Richard said, but his tone had lost some of its conviction. "This is reality," Emma replied. The fantasy was Marcus's previous strategy, trying to maximize short-term profits at the expense of customer satisfaction and employee morale. That approach was destroying the company from the inside. All I did was help Marcus see that. After Emma left the room, Richard sat silently for a moment. "I don't like her," he finally said. "I don't need you to like her," Marcus replied firmly, "but I do need you to recognize that she's right. And if you can't do that, if you can't accept that this company is moving in a direction that prioritizes human values alongside financial returns, then you and I are going to have a serious problem." Richard left the office chastened, but not convinced. Over the next few weeks, he began gathering allies. Other board members who were uncomfortable with Marcus's transformation and who saw an opportunity to regain influence. Their plan was subtle but effective. They would respect Emma's abilities while simultaneously suggesting that her influence was becoming too great, that Marcus needed more objective voices in the room, that the company needed to return to serious business strategy. The situation came to a head during a board meeting in late February. Richard presented financial data suggesting that the limited edition collection was diverting resources from the company's core business. He recommended scaling back production and returning to a more traditional profit-focused strategy. Several other board members voiced their agreement. Marcus felt the old pressure building, the expectation that he should make a ruthless decision, that sentiment had no place in business, that Emma's influence was a liability. He looked around the table at the faces of men and women who'd built their fortunes on exactly these principles. For a moment, the old Marcus, the Marcus who measured himself only in dollars and acquisitions, almost won. But then he thought about his mother's face, worn down by stress and disappointment. He thought about the factory workers he'd come to know, people who took pride in their work and wanted their labor to mean something. He thought about Emma, who'd walked into his life and shown him that there was another way. "Gentlemen, ladies," Marcus said, his voice steady and clear, "you've been on the board for years, you've made us money, and I'm grateful for that. But I'm not grateful enough to let you drag this company back into the past. We're moving forward. The limited edition collection is staying, the factory improvements are staying, and the company's renewed focus on quality and values is staying. If anyone on this board can't support that direction, I'd suggest you resign." There was a long silence. Then one by one, 4 board members, all of them allies of Richard, stood and walked out of the room. Richard remained, his face pale. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. "Maybe," Marcus replied. "But it's my mistake to make, and I'm making it with eyes wide open." After the board members left, Emma found Marcus in his office. He looked exhausted but resolute. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For choosing what's right over what's easy, for believing that there's another way, for becoming the man you're meant to be, instead of the man you were." Marcus pulled her close, and they stood together at the window, looking out at the city below. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. It was beautiful and sad at the same time. Beautiful because it was real, sad because it had taken him 34 years to recognize beauty. "I love you," he said. "I need you to know that. Not because you've done something for me, but because of who you are, the person you are." "I love you too," Emma whispered. "I always will." Everything changed on a Tuesday afternoon in March, 3 months after Emma had first walked into Sterling Industries. She was in Marcus's office when she received a phone call that made her face go pale. Marcus watched as her expression shifted from calm to shock to something that looked like fear. "I have to go," she said abruptly, grabbing her purse. "What's wrong?" Marcus asked, standing up. "Emma, tell me what's happening." "It's my mother," she said. "There's been an accident. I have to get to the hospital." Marcus didn't hesitate. He grabbed his keys, and within 15 minutes they were at Mount Sinai Hospital. Emma's mother, Patricia Waters, had been hit by a car while crossing the street in Queens. She'd been rushed into surgery, and for 6 hours, Marcus and Emma sat in a waiting room, Emma alternating between prayer and panic. When the surgeon finally emerged, the news was mixed. Patricia had survived, but she'd suffered severe injuries, a fractured pelvis, internal bleeding, and a traumatic brain injury that the doctors were still assessing. She would live, but her recovery would be long and uncertain. Emma fell apart. She'd spent so much of her life taking care of her mother, being the strong one, maintaining composure, but in that waiting room she broke down completely. Marcus held her as she sobbed, not saying anything, just being present with her in her pain. Over the next week, as Patricia remained unconscious in the ICU, Emma barely left the hospital. Marcus brought her meals she didn't eat, held her hand through the terrifying nights, and simply sat with her in her grief. He met Emma's extended family, her aunts and uncles, cousins, and her mother's friends. He saw the community that Emma had built around herself through years of kindness and genuine care. During this time, something became clear to both of them. Their relationship, which had felt so new and fragile just weeks earlier, had become the solid foundation of their lives. The corporate drama, the business challenges, the complications of their unconventional relationship, none of it mattered compared to this. They mattered to each other. When Patricia finally woke up on the 10th day after her accident, Emma was asleep in a chair beside her bed. Marcus was across the room, also sleeping. Patricia opened her eyes slowly, her vision blurry, her mind confused, but she recognized her daughter's face, and she reached out to touch her. Emma jerked awake at the contact. "Mom! Oh my God, Mom, you're awake!" She called for the nurses, for the doctors, and within moments they were checking Patricia's vital signs, asking her questions about her name and the date and whether she could feel her toes. Patricia couldn't speak clearly. The brain injury had affected her ability to form words, but she could communicate with gestures and increasingly with short phrases. Over the next few days, as her cognitive function improved, she began to understand what had happened and where she was. It was Marcus, surprisingly, who connected with Patricia most easily. He visited her every morning before work and every evening after, bringing flowers and small gifts and stories about Emma. He talked to her about his own mother, about loss and fear and the things that truly matter in life. And Patricia, who had raised her daughter to be kind and compassionate, recognized those same qualities in him. One afternoon, when Emma had gone to the cafeteria, Patricia grabbed Marcus's hand. Her speech was still difficult, but she managed to form the words, "You love Emma?" "Yes," Marcus said without hesitation. "I love her more than I've ever loved anything." Patricia smiled, then squeezed his hand. Good man." 3 weeks after her accident, Patricia was transferred out of the ICU to a regular recovery room. The doctors were cautiously optimistic about her recovery, though they warned that it would be a long process. She'd need months of physical and speech therapy, and there might be permanent effects from the brain injury. Emma was torn between staying at the hospital and returning to work. Marcus finally insisted on it. "Your mother wouldn't want you to sacrifice your life for her," he said. "And honestly, Sterling Industries needs you. The company is thriving, but without you there, people are second-guessing our direction. Come back, work with me. I'll hire the best private nurses to care for your mother around the clock." Emma was resistant at first. She'd spent her entire life putting everyone else's needs before her own, and the idea of stepping away from her mother's care felt like abandonment. But Marcus helped her see that caring for her mother meant ensuring her mother got the best care possible, which, given Patricia's medical needs, meant professional medical staff, not an exhausted daughter who was spreading herself too thin. So Emma returned to Sterling Industries in early April, and the company benefited immediately from her presence. The second collection, designed by Patricia, who was slowly gaining control of her speech and mobility, was in development, and Emma coordinated with the team to ensure it reflected the same artisanal values as the first. But something had shifted in her relationship with Marcus. The crisis with her mother had deepened their emotional intimacy, but it had also revealed something that Emma had been carefully not acknowledging. Marcus still saw business and the financial world as separate from their relationship. He'd been generous with his resources, but Emma sensed that there was some part of him that still viewed her as someone to be taken care of, rather than someone to be truly partnered with. The revelation came in the form of a document that Emma discovered on Marcus's desk while he was in a meeting. It was a legal agreement, specifically a prenuptial agreement that his lawyers had drawn up, which assumed that they would marry and specified how their assets would be divided in case of divorce. Emma's first instinct was hurt. Her second instinct was anger. She waited until Marcus returned to his office, then she confronted him directly. "What is this?" she asked, holding up the document. Marcus's face went carefully blank. "It's a standard legal document," he said. "My attorneys recommended it as a precaution." "A precaution against what?" Emma's voice was icy. "Against me? Against the possibility that I'm marrying you for your money, the way your board members have been suggesting?" "That's not what this is about," Marcus said, standing up from his desk. "It's about protecting my assets and ensuring that I don't get too much of your precious money if this doesn't work out," Emma finished, her voice shaking. "Marcus, do you understand what this says to me? It says that you love me conditionally. It says that you're still afraid I'm going to hurt you, that I'm somehow untrustworthy. After everything, After my mother's accident, after I gave up my job and my stability to come here, after I've proven myself to you over and over again, you still don't truly believe in me. That's not fair, Marcus said, his voice rising. You know how my family operated. You know that trust was conditional for me. I'm trying to protect myself because I don't know how to do anything else. Then learn, Emma cried. Love isn't about protecting yourself, Marcus. It's about being vulnerable. It's about trusting someone completely, even when you're terrified. And if you can't do that, then maybe we're making a mistake. She walked out of his office, leaving him standing alone. For the first time since she'd arrived at Sterling Industries, Emma questioned whether their relationship could survive the weight of their different worlds. Emma didn't go back to Marcus's office for 3 days. She worked from home, handling communications via email and video call, making sure that the company continued to operate smoothly despite the personal crisis between her and its CEO. The silence between them was deafening. On the 4th day, Marcus showed up at her apartment. She hadn't been expecting him, and the sight of him at her door, unshaven, exhausted, looking more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him, nearly broke her resolve. I got rid of it, he said without preamble. The prenuptial agreement. My lawyers thought I was insane, but I told them I didn't want it. I don't want to protect myself anymore, Emma. I want to build a life with you, and you can't do that if you're constantly defending against the possibility of loss. I called my therapist yesterday, something I haven't done in years, and I told him about my fear of vulnerability, about how I sabotage the good things in my life, because I'm terrified of being hurt the way my father hurt my mother. And he said something that changed everything. He said that love is always a risk. There's no guarantee. No amount of legal documents or financial protection can save you if someone decides to leave. The only protection is to choose every single day to build trust. He pulled out a small box and got down on one knee. Emma Waters, I'm choosing trust. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing to believe that you love me, not for my money, but for the person I'm becoming. Will you marry me? Emma cried. But these were different tears. Tears of joy and relief and the recognition that they'd passed through a fire and come out whole on the other side. Yes, she said, pulling him up to stand with her. Yes, absolutely, yes. The proposal made headlines, of course. The billionaire CEO and his former waitress. It was the kind of story that sold magazines and dominated social media. But this time, Emma didn't care what the world thought. She had something real. She had Marcus. They married on a Saturday in May, 6 months after they'd first met. The wedding was held at the Meridian Hotel, the place where their love story had begun. Emma's mother, though still in recovery, was there, walking with a cane and speaking carefully, but present and radiating joy. Marcus's few remaining family members attended, along with the employees of Sterling Industries, who had become like family to him. The ceremony was simple and genuine. Emma wore a dress designed by Patricia, the company's head designer, and Marcus wore a suit tailored to perfection. But what mattered wasn't the clothes or the venue. It was the love that filled the room, the recognition that two people from completely different worlds had found each other and chosen to build something meaningful together. As they exchanged vows, Marcus looked into Emma's eyes and saw his future clearly. It wasn't a future defined by financial empire or corporate dominance. It was a future built on love, trust, and the daily choice to value people over profit. I love you, he said, his voice steady and clear. And I promise to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me. I love you too, Emma replied. And I promise to keep reminding you what truly matters when the world tries to convince you otherwise. The wedding reception was joyous and celebratory, filled with dancing and laughter and the kind of genuine happiness that comes from knowing you've found your person. As Marcus and Emma danced together, the city glittering behind them through the ballroom windows, neither of them could believe how far they'd come in just 6 months. The first year of marriage brought unexpected challenges and equally unexpected joys. Living together revealed the small incompatibilities that all couples face. Emma's tendency to leave coffee cups on every surface, Marcus's need for absolute quiet in the mornings, but it also revealed the depth of their compatibility. They complemented each other. Where Marcus was logical and strategic, Emma was intuitive and empathetic. Where Emma could become lost in emotion, Marcus provided grounding. They balanced each other perfectly. The company continued to thrive under their joint leadership. Emma focused on culture and customer engagement, while Marcus handled the larger strategic decisions. They held weekly business meetings that often turned into philosophical discussions about the purpose of commerce and the responsibility that came with wealth and influence. During one of these meetings, Emma proposed an idea that would ultimately transform not just Sterling Industries, but Marcus's entire worldview about the purpose of wealth. What if we used the company's success not just to improve our own lives and our employees' lives, Emma said, but to create systemic change? What if we created a foundation that helped people in situations similar to mine, people without access to education or opportunities, people trapped by circumstance rather than by any lack of ability? Marcus was intrigued. Within weeks, they'd established the Sterling Waters Foundation, named after both of them, with the goal of providing scholarships, mentorship, and job training to low-income individuals across the United States. Emma became the foundation's director, drawing on her own experience to create programs that addressed not just the financial barriers to success, but the psychological and social ones as well. The foundation grew rapidly. By the end of their first year of marriage, they'd provided scholarships to 300 students and job training to another 500 individuals. The impact was visible and measurable. Lives were being changed, opportunities were being created, and the cycle of poverty was being interrupted for many people. 5 years after Emma first walked into Sterling Industries and changed Marcus Sterling's life forever, they stood together at a gala honoring the people whose lives had been transformed by the Sterling Waters Foundation. There were entrepreneurs who'd gone from unemployment to building successful businesses. There were professionals who'd advanced their careers and were now in leadership positions. There were educators and mentors who were paying forward the opportunities they'd been given. The room was filled with the energy of people who understood that their lives mattered. People who had been given a chance and seized it with both hands. People who were now extending that same chance to others. Each story shared that evening was a testament to the transformative power of belief, investment, and genuine care. Each success was a ripple in the pond that would continue to expand outward, touching lives they would never directly know. As Emma looked around the room, she felt overwhelming gratitude. This wasn't about her or Marcus. It was about the resilience and capability of human beings when they were given the opportunity and support to pursue their potential. It was about the power of believing in people, of seeing their worth, even when the world had told them they had none. It was about the understanding that poverty is not a reflection of capability or character. It's simply a circumstance that can be changed with the right support and resources. "Do you remember where we started?" Marcus whispered to her as they watched people dance and celebrate. "In a restaurant," Emma said. "You were cruel to me, and I loved you anyway." She smiled at the memory. How naive she must have seemed to him, how improbable her offer to save his company. "I wasn't cruel to you," Marcus said. "I was cruel to myself. And you saw that. You saw through my cruelty to the frightened man beneath it. You didn't judge me for my armor. You just kept insisting there was something better possible." Emma took his hand. "I saw a man who'd forgotten how to live. And I wanted to remind him. I saw your potential before you did. That's the real magic. Not that I helped you save your company, but that I helped you save yourself. And in the process, I found myself too. As they danced together, surrounded by people whose lives had been transformed by their work, Emma and Marcus felt the full weight of their journey. They'd come so far, not just financially or professionally, but spiritually and emotionally. They'd learned that love wasn't about possession or control. It was about seeing someone fully and choosing them anyway. It was about believing in people's capacity for transformation. Marcus thought about his father, the cold man who'd raised him to believe that love was conditional and vulnerability was weakness. He thought about his mother, who died having never experienced real love or respect. And he was grateful, profoundly grateful, that he'd broken that cycle, that he'd chosen differently. Emma thought about her mother, the woman who'd worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat, who'd taught her that kindness mattered more than money. She thought about how her mother's values, passed down to her, had ultimately transformed not just her own life, but the lives of thousands of other people. And as they looked into each other's eyes, they understood the deepest truth. The greatest wealth in the world is not measured in dollars or power. It's measured in love, in purpose, in the knowledge that your life has mattered. It's measured in the faces of people you've helped, the dreams you've made possible, and the love you share with another person who sees you fully and chooses you anyway, day after day, for the rest of your life. Looking back across the years, both realized that their journey had been far more profound than a simple romance story. It was a transformation that had rippled outward, touching thousands of lives. It was proof that change is possible, that redemption is attainable, and that love, real, genuine, unconditional love, has the power to reshape not just individual lives, but entire communities. Marcus had learned that the measure of a man isn't the size of his bank account or the power he wields in boardrooms. It's the positive impact he has on others, the vulnerabilities he's willing to share, and the capacity he develops to love deeply and authentically. Emma had learned that her humble beginnings didn't define her ceiling. They defined her compassion, her resilience, and her ability to see potential in others, where the world saw only limitation. Together, they had created something that transcended business metrics and personal achievement. They had created a movement that said every person, regardless of their starting point, deserves the chance to become their best self. A movement that proved purpose is more profitable than pure greed. A movement that demonstrated love is the most revolutionary force in human experience. Their marriage was a testament to this truth. Every challenge they'd faced, from the corporate skepticism to the prenuptial agreement controversy to the crisis with Emma's mother, had strengthened rather than weakened their bond. Because they'd learned that real love doesn't run away from difficulty. It walks toward it, it faces it, it chooses, moment by moment, to believe in the other person's capacity for growth and change. That is the magic of Marcus and Emma's story. That is the transformation that love can bring. And that is the enduring legacy of 2 people who chose each other, and in choosing each other, chose to change the world. Their love story wasn't about finding perfection. It was about finding wholeness. 2 broken people who discovered that together, with trust, vulnerability, and genuine commitment, they could create something whole, something beautiful, something that would last not just for a lifetime, but for generations to come.